Hey folks, welcome to Friday, yay, TGIF and all. TJ, week 2, and the topic this week, as you all might have seen already, is interactions with cisgender men. So, just talking about what our interactions are like and in what capacity they existed. So I've actually had a pretty cool experience with cis guys, particularly during the time when I started my physical transition. The 2 years prior to this past year, I worked at a university in Vermont, and there were a bunch of guys who would get together every once in a while and kind of just created community with each other, and all men of color. And from pretty much the moment I got on campus and I was hired, and very openly identified as trans, and folks knew all about that stuff, I was invited into the men of color group, which was exciting on two fronts, both that I was getting invited into a men's group, and also that other men of color were recognizing me as a person of color, which, it was definitely a first for me. So I really appreciated that. I was the only trans person in the group. Everybody else was cisgender, and it was just a fantastic group of folks. I feel like some of my closest friends are definitely from that group, and it's the thing that I miss the most here now, living in Tennessee, is this group of folks that we got together and talked about gender all the time. And that's pretty rare, having a group of guys, particularly non-trans guys, talking about gender all the time. And we did. We talked about race too, obviously, since that was also part of the reason why the group got together. But it was just really, really refreshing to talk about gender with other guys. My experience up until then, in terms of talking about gender, tended to be with either other trans folk or with women. So it was pretty cool. So I've been living here in Tennessee for the last year, and the work I do is pretty much in the capacity of doing LGBTQI work in a college campus, and sometimes volunteering for middle and high school level kind of work too. So I pretty much exist in this queer world. So most of my interactions with cis guys tend to be with gay or bi men, whether they're students or folks that I'm partnering with, co-presenting with, or my supervisor, etc., etc., etc. So it's very much in this queer context, and most of the time that's how I get read, is as one of them, and that's definitely been very interesting. I have a lot of mannerisms that are read or tagged as effeminate or feminine, so I think that kind of also helps with that. And so I constantly have to come out, which is interesting, that I didn't necessarily need to come out in this other group that was predominantly straight, all cis guys, whereas with most of the queer community, I constantly have to come out as a trans man, and as someone who's predominantly attracted to queer women. But they tend to be positive. They tend to get a little awkward after folks figure it out, but they get over it. In terms of colleagues or other folks around who are straight and cisgender, my interactions are pretty low-key. I think the 2 or 3 folks from my workplace that I sometimes hang out with, they're pretty cool guys. Pretty sure they know about my identity, and I think they pretty much see me as like one of the guys, no biggie. So I predominantly had really good interactions with the cis guys in my life. regardless of sexuality. And I think it really stemmed from being a part of that group in Vermont. It really boosted my confidence in being able to relate with other men, regardless of this not shared history in our childhoods of, you know, me not being a boy, not being raised as a boy. And it's really helped me kind of find the ways to insert my experience into the conversation if it's appropriate, and being able to talk about my past in ways that feel affirming, and can contribute to the conversation just as their conversations about their past can. So it's been pretty cool. Other than that, I don't know that I interact with cis guys beyond work, really. It predominantly tends to be in the context of work. The majority of the people I socialize with are queer women. Yeah, the cis guy interaction is definitely on the low pole. And then there's just a couple of trans folk around that I'll sometimes hang out with, sometimes see. It's pretty rare. That's pretty much it. Before Vermont, before this group, I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have a lot of friends who were cisgender men, and I didn't necessarily seek them out either. I tended to feel very intimidated by cis men. Sometimes felt some tinges of jealousy. So I just didn't like that feeling, and also because really I sought community with other trans men at the time. So it was a lot more important for me to connect with trans men than it was to connect with cis guys. So I tended to avoid them. There were some folks who were friends who were cis and predominantly also queer, but for the most part, most of my friends were trans guys and women. Yeah, and that's been pretty much my experience. So thank you to all the guys in the Men of Color group in Vermont. You all have definitely been my brothers, and I miss you all tremendously. And I hope that I can find other groups like the ones that we had, but you'll always be very special in my heart, and I miss you every day. Thanks.